Thank you all for allowing me to come and talk about a project that we've had in the works for quite some time. I'm going to be giving an overview. There's actually a lot going on within this city, and I'm not going to bore you with all of the details that you're already familiar with, such as...
Try it. You have to point here, yes.
There we go.
No?
Maybe?
Okay, then just give me a note, then I do it for you.
Okay. There we go. So we can go through the next slides probably pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Y'all know we flood. This is not new. This is a lot of background information that I usually put in the different presentation pieces. We'll put this on our website if you ever want to go back and look. Dead time. I might not have turned it on. Oh, there we go.
Sorry, my fault.
Yeah, no worries. All the technology. But I have a couple of posters up here that if you have time to come up and take a look, it's an overview of the project that I'm going to be talking about specifically here in a little bit. But we have Takoi Engineering has been retained to help us with the design for the project. And actually James Pierce, our engineer of record, he's frantically trying to make his way through here in traffic. So if there were technical questions that I couldn't answer, he'll be coming here in a little bit to kind of help with the project. But as far as like North and Davis Shores, I like to put these maps on here because it just shows elevations. This is one of our original neighborhoods. It's low-lying, it's been developed over time, and a lot of that, y'all are familiar with this. It's flood-prone, and we have a lot of challenges within the city. We have aging storm infrastructure, and we're trying our best to try to do maintaining it, upgrading where we have, but it's just very expensive. And so we have rainfall inundation, and we have coastal inundation, and so we just kind of get bombarded from various aspects of flooding. And I did want to talk a little bit about, this is kind of our storm map of all the different things that we maintain. It's just basically vulnerable entry points for the water to come in, and y'all are very familiar with that. You live it every day. And so I don't want to belabor that point, but I do want to make a differentiation on the types of flooding, because this does come important when we're talking about projects and strategies that we're trying to combat the different types of flooding. So for us in the city, we're familiar with our king tides and our nuisance flooding, the high tide flooding events. We also get those coastal events that could be a nor'easter or in some cases hurricanes. And then we have just rainfall flooding just from when it rains and hits the ground. And then in some cases there's enough water to where it's actually flooding San Sebastian River system. So when you add all those together, we get a compound flood event, which is unfortunately something that happens quite a bit within the city. So our strategy is to look at projects that we can do to help address the flooding. Planning and studies is actually really important. The planning is definitely a key piece because we can identify the projects that we can then get funding for to actually implement. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. And there's obviously policy things that we can be doing in programs. And I did want to highlight for the neighborhood, we've got a lot of projects that we've completed. We've got a lot that are current, and we also have a lot of partnership projects. And I bolded the ones that are kind of relevant for this particular neighborhood association. I'm going to be talking specifically about Inlet Drive here shortly. On the planning and study side, we have done a lot within the city. We're looking at everything. We have a big back-based study coming online, or has been online for a couple of years now with the Army Corps of Engineers. It's looking comprehensively at everything citywide. So that is in the works right now. We've done a vulnerability assessment update, and we've looked at other types of things, and we're working at our partnership level at the Northeast Regional Council level, working with other 7 counties in our region on that too. And so I just wanted to kind of highlight, hey, we've done some stuff here with the plannings and studies. And then I also want to highlight, it's actually a lot of the things that have happened in North and South Davis Shores that have driven policy and programs that we now have in place today. So I just wanted to highlight, and I'm trying to figure out how to not make that feedback on the microphone. So I apologize, I know that's probably quite annoying. So policy and programs, a lot of these things have actually stemmed from some of the challenges that have come in North and South Davis Shores. So again, we're doing what we can as a city to try to do what we can to help our residents and our community in the short and the long term. And so as far as programs and policies, just a quick raise of hands, how many, because I see familiar faces, how many have participated in the flood mitigation assistance program through FEMA? There's a few. So we've got quite a few properties that are in the fiscal year 2022 application cycle. It's a long haul process. It's with FEMA, it's a cost share to help lift structures that are flood prone. And we, as far as I know, we have not been told otherwise, we should still be getting that money. I know there's been a lot of uncertainty with things that are happening with federal funding right now, but that is still moving forward. So we have a lot of properties that are in those programs that we do believe are still gonna happen and move forward with that too. And this is just a map showing where a lot of those properties are in that bucket that we're going to be getting funding for, and a lot of the concentration is in North and South Davis Shores. So those are good things. Eventually we're going to be able to get those contracts in place and hopefully get those houses lifted. So I want to talk about Inlet Drive. This project's actually been in the works for a number of years. Over time, the shoreline, and we're talking about that section that's like that natural shoreline piece that's along Inlet Drive that faces Salt Run. These are some pictures here. The one on the left is just kind of facing the existing wall, and then the one on the right, that's during one of our hurricanes. And so this is a vulnerable piece of infrastructure from the city side that floods. And so we had that coastal storm event coming through. It's tearing up the shoreline, it's flooding the roads, and it's causing a lot of damage. So we have grant funding to go in and rehabilitate and harden the shoreline to help protect the road. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that project in more detail. It is city-owned property for a large section of the shoreline. And I had mentioned it's been repeatedly damaged over the years. And so now that we have funding, we can actually try to do something to help mitigate the damages that keep happening. It is critical infrastructure. So the vulnerability assessment that we just wrapped up, this road is a main in and out for the neighborhood. And if we don't do something over time, these storms are going to continue to erode that shoreline. So we want to try to do something to protect the road. So that's kind of the main objective, is try to help protect the road, which is critical to the neighborhood. A secondary benefit is by putting in, and I'll talk more specifics about how we're going to do that, we're talking about putting in a bulkhead to help protect that road. There will be a secondary benefit to reduce that coastal surge coming through and causing flooding. So it does have a flood reduction benefit. It's not the primary purpose of the project, but that will definitely help, so we won't have as much water just coming into the neighborhood from this one particular location. There is also an existing shoreline that's there that's actually doing a really nice job that we're going to go in and enhance. That's the second part of the project that I'm going to talk about. So we have this website set up. We're going to put this presentation and other things that we've been pulling together for the project, so anyone can go and take a look at it if you have questions on that as well. And so the scope of the work, what we're going to be doing, and I've got some slides to show the alignment. We're going to be putting in a new wall behind the existing wall. We're going to stay away from the wetlands and the marsh and the mangroves. It's going to be closer to the road. Put that road or that bulkhead in that will help tie in the elevations. So right now the existing elevations of the grass area that's right on the shoulder of the road is probably like around 5 feet. And so if you think of Hurricanes Matthew and Irma, those are coming in at 7 and 8 feet. That's a lot of water coming into the neighborhood. So the wall is actually going to tie into north and south existing elevations. So it's probably going to be around 8 feet. It ranges between 8 to 8 and 0.75-ish, just depending on kind of how the grading is on that. So we are talking about putting in a little bit higher wall. It's probably about hip high. We have it staked. So we had our surveyor go out and stake the alignment. So if you've walked that neighborhood or seen it, that's what those stakes are for. And I've got some pictures to kind of show that. We're basically trying to avoid any of the existing shoreline area. We want to stay out of that area and just kind of work more on the land side. And then also, there are 2 existing storm pipes and inlets that we're going to be replacing. That will help with the rainfall flooding that hits the road. We can capture that better. We're going to be putting a one-way valve into the storm pipe as well. That'll help with the tide, so it's not just backing up into the street through the storm pipe. And again, this will help reduce the coastal storm impacts. So that's kind of the main purpose of the project. So let's talk about some wall alignment. This graphic kind of shows where it's located. So it's going to be tying up the elevations on the north and the south, and it's hugging kind of close to where the existing wall is. And then this, it's probably a little bit hard to see. Let me see if I can use a little laser pointer. How about that? So this is what the blocking looks like. We're not doing a fence on top. That's just kind of like a standard picture of what the wall would look like. But this is kind of to show the cross section. So you have the road over here, there's gonna be some grass, and we're gonna kind of slope and backfill. So the wall is gonna be, there's gonna be like a slope that goes up to it. And then we've got the top of the wall, and then we're gonna be kind of leaving the existing wall alone and then kind of tying that in. So this is kind of what it would look like from the side. And there's another part of this project that I was gonna talk about too in just a minute, but before we get to that, this is just to kind of show the staked alignment. So these are survey stakes, and so that orange flag is kind of marking where the very top peak of the wall would be. So that'll kind of give you an idea of what we're talking about as far as height. Again, it is tying into the north and south elevations. We didn't want to put it too low because then you still have more water potentially coming in and entering into the neighborhood. So this, and then you can kind of see the alignment as it's shown here along the shoreline as well. And I'll definitely be taking questions as soon as I get through some of these. I just have a couple more slides left. There's a second part of this project that we're hoping to be able to construct with the wall. We have grant funding, a little over $1 million to do this, and there's actually a really nice living shoreline that's there already, and we would like to enhance that. There's some riprap rubble that's there today. We'd like to take that out, let it naturally revegetate, and then we're talking about adding in what's called a wave attenuation device. So this is something that we're piloting. It's fairly new technology. It has been done in other parts of the state, but it helps with that wave energy. So all the wave action kind of coming in, and when that wind is pushing, it'll help dampen those waves so it's not hitting the shoreline and the wall as much. And the mangroves are doing a nice job. There's already oysters, and there's also a lot of smooth cord grass that's in the area. So we don't need to enhance that. We're just trying to help it along a little bit better. And so then, I think, there we go. So the next steps, and these are some pictures of kind of what those wave attenuation devices would look like. This is being installed at the Jacksonville Zoo, and this is, they are more like at low tide is when you would see them. They're usually below the surface of the water. You wouldn't really notice them typically. And then these are the oyster gabions, and then these are the reef balls. So kind of where we're at, we've been going out doing a lot of data collection. You've probably seen surveyors out there and geotech and that kind of thing. That's helping with our alignment of the bulkhead. And now we're at a point where we need to start talking to the property owners, where we need easements, and then start the permitting process, which will feed into final design. We are on a tight timeline, unfortunately, with the grant funding. So we have until June of 2026 to get the project built, essentially, so we can retain those dollars that have been assigned to us on it. So we are on an aggressive schedule. So we've been kind of pushing to get that done. And I think with that was my last slide. So I'm sure you have plenty of questions. I don't know, Roger, if we have time for questions on that. So. And I want to say, too, I want to thank everybody that maybe has emailed or given us phone calls on it. We have not had time to return all the calls and the emails, so I'm hoping that this meeting we can answer questions, and then we'll post this, and we'll do our best to kind of follow up if you have reached out. So I think I saw maybe your hand up first.
I know from walking in that area with the walls, there's a lot of people that use that for recreation, and they do like windsurfing and stuff. Is there any talk of putting any kind of a ramp in conjunction with the wall so they can still drag their surfing stuff and enjoy that area as well?
So I'm going to go back. I think I'm going to try
Can
to
you
go back.
repeat the question, please?
I will repeat the question too as I'm trying to go back on the slides. I was trying to go back to the cross section to maybe show everybody. The question was about access, and that's probably one of the questions we've been getting a lot of questions about. So this has been city property. It's right there on the water. A lot of people have just kind of gone down and accessed the water through that. It's not technically like a recreational park, and that kind of goes outside the scope of our project. We have been getting a lot of questions about the access on it, so I think as far as this project, it would be something that's not done as part of this because it would cause more delays. We have been looking into that. It just triggers like a whole nother set of challenges when you're talking about ADA and availability. This is federal funds, so we're kind of trying to be careful with what we actually put. So if we start scope creeping, we could potentially lose the funding for the project. So we're kind of sticking with this, but I think it's a conversation that may be worth initiating with the neighborhood to gauge interest, because if people really do want to keep using the access, we probably need to have a conversation about, is this the appropriate place? Is there a better place that might be more applicable to the neighborhood? And maybe have that conversation. So I kind of see that as potentially like a separate project potentially that we could look at. Yeah, but it's definitely one of the questions we've been getting a lot about too. So yes, sir. No, so the mangroves are separate and they're under separate regulations. The question was, does this project impact the mangroves? And the short answer is no. We're trying to stay as far away from any of the wetland areas because it does complicate permitting and mitigation things and whatnot. So the city is looking separately, and we've actually engaged the Department of Environmental Protection, who regulates mangroves, to talk about potential for trimming in that area, but it's a whole nother thing. It's kind of outside the scope of this, but the city is looking at it separately. Yes, so I think oh yes, I'm not sure who went up first, maybe.
There's no other area
of the neighborhood. That's ridiculous. Like, I walk the island all the time. There is absolutely no other spot. You take that away, we're left with no spot. I mean, so then you only get to use the water if you live on it.
Yeah, so I think that's a really good question / point that we've been getting feedback from the neighborhood. So it is outside the scope of this project, but I think it's worth maybe another conversation with the neighborhood to look at that specifically. It gets really complex with the tight permitting timeline and the project timeline we're with funding, that if we start adding in access and things like that, it becomes a whole nother project.
Wall is high. I mean, it's not, if there's a big hurricane, it's certainly not gonna stop the flood.
It'll definitely help with like hurricanes, like the recent ones we've had. I do think you're still going to be able to kind of get over the wall, like on that cross section here. Keep in mind that this is going to be kind of sloped back, so I do think people can still get over it. But it's, again, we go back to the objective of the project. We're trying to protect the road. It's not necessarily access. But I do understand there's been a lot of concern for that too. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I live on Arcola, and 20 years I call the city every 2 years. Between Arcola and Coquina, we have little water concern, and it's all overgrown. And they promised me to clean that out. That would help a lot, but nothing happens there.
So that's
I just wonder if they've been out there, but they haven't done nothing.
So the question is actually on South Davis Shores, the Coquina ditch that runs, it's like basically a drainage spine for that neighborhood on the south end. We actually have a project in design right now looking at that. He was basically asking about maintenance, and we recently have, city's supposed to be going out there to clean that out as best as we can. But you're right, it gets overgrown and sometimes it takes heavy equipment and it's kind of hard to get back there, but it is on our radar.
It's not hard to get out, it's a road there, you can get in there.
Yeah, some of the road pieces that's existing, that is the best way to get in and out. And sometimes if you need the heavy equipment, it's a challenge. But I think people are going to be going by and doing like hand clearing, as we've recently talked about that too. So I think there was another question over on this side, or was that, I'm not sure. I think there was 2 hands that went up, but maybe not. Okay, I'll move on. Yes, sir.
So what's the concern for Inlet Drive flooding? Because now you got a bigger wall, which helps keep the seawater out, but I see more flooding on Inlet Drive from rain and on my driveway side.
Sure.
And now you've just made a bigger pool.
So the question is on the rainfall-driven flooding. So if we go back to the types of flooding, it gets really challenging trying to tackle all the different types of flooding. So we are going to be increasing the size of the drains and the inlets that are there. So it actually should help improve the rain in that section. But keep in mind that when we start talking about the entire neighborhood, that is a larger system that we're not able to really tackle with this particular project. So I think in that section where the water drains to the existing inlets, we'll be able to upgrade that and improve that piece of that. But for the overall neighborhood, that's a separate challenge.
That would have to be a part of this project for at least the local neighbors right there. That if you're putting a big wall in front that their rainwater can't drain, you got to improve the drainage. And
that's what we're doing. That's part of the project, is to improve the existing drainage with that too. So I think that'll address that section there too. Just not the rest of the neighborhood. I wanted to make sure that was clear on that too. Yes, sir, in the back. So the question is like, basically if you're standing on the road, how high is the wall gonna be? So the road's like around, and so James Pierce is our engineer of record. So welcome, James, say hi.
Hi.
So I think the road's like around 5, and then it goes up a little bit where the grassed area is maybe 5.5 feet, possibly 6 in some areas. So then you're talking about going to about like 8, and then that kind of varies a little bit. So you're probably looking about 3 feet above the road. It's about hip high-ish. Yes. So we did the stake alignment on purpose after kind of meeting with the initial residents right in the area, and that was one of the big questions, is like, well, where exactly is this going? And we talk about 8 feet. Keep in mind, this is engineering brain. It's a survey datum. It's not an 8-foot wall. So just to appease everybody, we're talking about like a 3.5 foot high physical wall over what's there now. And the staked alignment, that orange flag that's on the stake, is to help kind of show where that would be. So as you're walking the neighborhood, you can kind of get an idea for what that's going to look like. Yes, sir.
How wide is the top of the wall? Just sit on it.
So that question, James, has been coming up quite a bit. So, right now we have kind of like a little bit of a a point, like a triangular top on that. It mimics the wall downtown, if you've noticed, like that has the peak on it. But I've been kind of hearing some rumblings from residents, like, nah, do you really have to do that? Maybe you could do it flat. You know, we're thinking more of like access and not encouraging people to walk on it and fall and things like that. But you know, that might be something that we really look at again. But as far as the width of it, I think the width of it's like, is it about 24 inches? Is about 2 feet wide, roughly. So, yeah. Yes, sir.
When do you hope you start?
Well, we've started design, and the permitting is kind of the next step. Is actual construction is really going to depend on how long it takes to get all of our permits in place. But we do have a hard deadline. So June of next year, 2026, is when we really have to spend down the funds that they've given us. So that's kind of where we're pushing. The project construction should be relatively quickly. We're thinking 6 to 9 months-ish. So the big long time lead items is getting through the permitting and the design piece of that, which is what we're in right now. Any more questions?
I'd like to ask one.
Yes, sir.
Your new pipe that you all put in at the foot of King Street with the last flood, did it live up to your expectations?
So I think you're talking about the Department of Transportation drainage improvements that they did, like right by the Bridge Alliance on that. As far as, yes, so it's actually sized to accommodate the King Street project. And so there's gonna be, it's essentially just kind of waiting for all the pieces to connect into it. So for now, it's ready to be, ready to take on more water. It's a pretty large system, and they sized it for like a big project coming, like drainage going that way.
This last sort of storm that we sort of had, where all the water was being pushed up and over the wall again, did it do its
Yes,
thing?
yes. The short answer to that is yes. So they put tide check valves in those drainage pipes, and those have been working. So yes, that one section is good for that
Kept it
too.
off the main drag.
It did.
Pretty much.
It did. Now it comes from other places, and we're
Sure,
trying to,
sure.
it's like basically trying to put holes in the dam. We're trying to plug as much as we can. It's a citywide challenge that we're looking at, and the Army Corps study is looking at very comprehensively at that, and that's a little bit longer term. So these are shorter term projects that we can try to get done. James, did I forget anything? We kind of went through the project and background and things like that.
Have a title check valve on this one.
Yes, I did. I don't know that I mentioned that. So when we're resizing the drainage, we're talking about like rainfall, we'll be putting a one-way valve on those so it keeps the tide water from backing up and flooding under the wall essentially, so, or through it, so to speak, so. Okay, so I don't want to take up too much time, but thank you.